Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second season of our Crushing Comics book club. Of course, the first season wasn't called that. We called it our Epic X-Men reread, and we just wrapped up by reading the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. And now we are tackling another truly epic read for our second season. And that epic read is Grant Morrison's Batman, including some of the classic material that has influenced the run. For this season of reading, I am joined by my comic friends who are comic fans from around the world from me, Fariha and Harry. Since this is our intro to Batman, we're going to be talking about some of our own personal history with the character, as well as our reads of his two debut issues in Detective Comics 27 and Batman #1. And I thought it would be probably a good thing before we do any other talking to even say, why are we reading this? Why have we pivoted from X-Men to Batman? Why Batman? Why Marson? And actually, Harry is the one who brought this to us and beat the drum and got us all on board. So even though we're all going to give our reasons, Harry is kind of the captain of this Crushing Comics book club read. And Harry's going to talk to us first about why we are reading Morrison's Batman.
Okay, so Batman is obviously one of, if not the most popular superhero or comics character in the world, if that or Spider-Man or what have you. Now, and as a result of that, there are so many good Batman runs. I think if you probably guess like which character has the most like quality comics, like just in sheer amount, it's got to be Batman in the top 2 or 3. So even with all that said, Grant Morrison's Batman run is one of the more unique and colorful and off the wall crazy kind of series that is completely true to that character while not being the kind of typical dark, brooding, serious thing. There's a bit of that. Don't get me wrong. That's still Batman. That's all still there. Rita just had a bit of a reaction. But like, it's taking this character that is the most understood and using it to explore all of these insane ideas, this Kirby space stuff, this idea of like iconography as like a manifestation and a force battling these eternal forces. And I'm going to go on long tangents during this. But the point is, it's the most fun comics. It's completely off the wall. And like, I'm just curious what everyone else thinks of it. I'm really curious what Fariha thinks of it.
Now let's hear from Fariha, because Fariha did not have to join us for this. It really could have just been Harry and Peter talking about Grant Morrison's Batman. And so clearly you had a reason that you volunteered to go through this material with us. Why? What is the allure? Why have you come to this season of our book club?
Well, first reason was obviously to put some womanly touch to the discussion. You know, can't be having boys talking about Batman all the time because it's just, a little boring. But another thing is that, we have been doing Epic X-Men reread. And to me, both of these are kind of like what X-Men is to Marvel, Batman is to DC. It's like without these IPs, the companies will fall apart. They will go bankrupt on an instant. So to me, even though they have outlived their reason, because obviously Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, when they created X-Men, it was because they couldn't talk about queer characters, and even though they kind of did it poorly, but it's there, it was like an allegory reason and stuff. And now we on the Batman side, it's about like rich white men's plight after losing their parents. What do they do? So however, now it's like, well, you don't necessarily need to talk about it from that point of view. There's a lot of things, if we compare Batman or the idea of Batman to real world, it kind of falls apart in many different ways. Why is he not doing anything for children or like anything for Gotham to build it up? Why is his criminals always getting out? Is just because he can beat them up again and then put them back in the jail. Not to mention all the children that are under him getting killed or severely maimed. So a lot of that needs to be discussed. And I feel like I want to get some answers. And I think this will provide me that answers.
I think you're going to have fun one way or the other. That's all I
better have some fun. I read on way too many Batman Golden Age. So I'm due for some fun, guys.
I'm coming to this from a very different place that I've come to any of our X-Men reading. And I think a big part of that is I'm not the expert on this in any capacity whatsoever. I'm not really a DC expert. I'm not really a Batman expert. I'm not really a Morrison expert. I'm really just tagging along for the fun of it and thinking back to 2010, which is when I came back to comics after my initial reading in the 90s, I read New X-Men, Morrison's New X-Men, because everybody told me to, and that's where I should start, and that's where the modern era begins. And I hated it so much. I was like, what is this garbage? We can revisit my opinions on that in some future X-Men book club. But then I read some other X-Men too. And I said, well, I want to read some other Morrison, because Morrison was kind of untouchable to me in the early 90s. They weren't as big as they became. And a lot of their really seminal stuff that was already recognized, like Animal Man, like I wasn't going to walk into my local comic book shop and just buy a run of Morrison's Animal Man. That wasn't available. So Morrison was really this myth to me. And Batman was the run that was currently running. And so I started it, but I never got to finish it because I started while Flashpoint and all that stuff was happening. And then DC News 52 started and the run kind of got interrupted, but it kind of came back and it took a little bit of time. And I just fell off because I was making guides and reading X-Men and living life and having a kid and all those other things I was doing. So, but actually, I really, really loved it. I found it unputdownable. I had this great leather armchair back in the States that we didn't bring with us, unfortunately. And I just remember being all curled up in it with my laptop, reading it and being like, about every issue. So I'm really excited to come back to that now, knowing more about Marson, knowing a little bit more about Batman, and also to just get to read the whole thing with literally a decade of experience of being a modern comic book reader. I don't know if it's going to hold up more or less for me. So I'm just excited about all of that. And I'm really excited about to not be the know-it-all. That is exciting. It's not a role I always like to play.
I'm just getting excited by all this conversation about this. This is going to be so fun. Anyway.
Did you hated New X-Men because of Beak and all the ugly mutants?
Well, that book's just not great. I'll say it. Like,
hold on. We save it. Yeah. Save it for the future, folks. Oh. If people want to see our new X-Men opinions, they can sound off and let us know that we've got to come to that. This is not a Marvel show. I know it's going to be hard to suppress all of our Marvel urges that we usually lead into the recording with. So as we continue this go round, before we get a little bit into Marson and some of the early Batman material, I want to do a go round of what is your like first Bat memory? Because he's so pervasive across so much media that we've all come to Batman in different ways at different points of our lives. And then we'll go back around and talk about the Bat cast a little bit. So Harry, what is your first Batman memory?
So, I've been a huge ass nerd since day one, but that said, I weirdly did not have a lot of connection to Batman ever. I did not watch the Tim Burton films. I did not watch the Schumacher films, XYZ. The first connection to Batman, I swear to God, was finding out watching I'm going to date myself really hard during all this, just so we're clear.
What?
But I really, really liked, as everyone my age did, the Teen Titans show growing up. And it was just a cool Cartoon Network show. But it took me at least a year to realize that the Robin in that show was connected to Batman and that this was a DC property. It went completely over my head.
Well, because a lot of movies and stuff don't have Robin with Batman.
Exactly. I just thought it was a completely separate. So honestly, DC and comics in general was Teen Titans was my introduction. That's what got me into comics, actually, probably in the first place. Anyway, but for Batman, 2008, you just can't separate it. It was The Dark Knight. That was the biggest movie of all time. When you're in 8th grade, no one say anything, but and it was very exciting. I
was gonna say kindergarten, but okay.
Yeah, no. I got my juice box and I saw The Dark Knight, and but it's just that's when you understand who that character is. I think that movie is a great way to break down what the fundamentals of that character. It's why those movies are so good. They get the basic understanding of that character super well, or at least informed my understanding of it, and that was kind of where understanding Batman through The Dark Knight and then Batman Begins, I kind of went back. You understand everything going forward. And then I got into Year One, and then I got into The Long Halloween, and then weirdly the Joker, Brian Azzarello graphic novel, which is kind of like a fun aside. And that was kind of like my starting point.
Free, what about you? What is the earliest knowledge you had of Batman?
Batman and Robin by Joel Schumacher.
Okay, so that's it. That's a good movie.
That was the first movie I've ever seen, of Batman. I mean, I knew of Batman before then, it was like a Batman. But the thing is, I think it was showing up in HBO back somewhere around 99 or 2000. And then I watched it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome.
I don't know.
I mean, I was 12 and 13 back then. 12 or 13 back then. So when I watched it. So the thing is so that was my first. And then I went and watched the Batman animated. But then 2005, when the Batman Begins came out, after I watched that, I went and read a bunch of short, graphic novel or whatever, one-off stories. Dark Knight Rises was one of my first comics that I actually read, superhero comics that I actually read, and then Killing Joke, and then a bunch of other, Long Halloween, a bunch of other ones. And I'm like, oh, this is rather cool. And then obviously Dark Knight, the Dark Knight happened. I watched Dark Knight 32 times in my lifetime.
What? That's a lot of time.
I've definitely seen it more.
I know, it's it's I don't know, I've seen it way too. I mean, the more you watch it, the more you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. What is that? But I think
I just bought the 4K disc. I got to rewatch it.
I think that's for any Chris Nolan movies, that you're like, the more you watch it, the more it kind of starts to fall apart. But that's okay.
Wow.
I was just fascinated by Heath Ledger's performance and then all of that. And I actually going to talk about it a little bit later as well. But yeah, so that was the one that I was like, whoa. Yeah. So even though I started off saying that, what is the point of Batman? Here I am watching his movies.
The Joel Schumacher fan revealed.
Hey, but I don't actually care. I also love Batman Beyond. I love that show. I really love it. So yeah, that's my story. Oh, and Lego Batman. Mwah.
Oh, those are great. Yeah, those are good games.
Well, no, not games. The movie.
The movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As usual, I trend a little bit older, not just because I am a little older than, or a lot older, depending on which of you I'm speaking to, but I always liked older stuff. That was always my shtick, even as a kid. So for me, it's absolutely the Adam West and Bruce Ward 1960s Batman show. Like, I definitely had Batman toys, and I was watching the Super Friends cartoon. But even before the Batman movie came out in 1989, I know that I've seen all those things that many of you just know as GIFs, like, Batman running around with the bomb over his head, or them walking up the side of the building. Like, I've seen those, and I don't know that I loved it. It was just kind of background noise. It was one of those things that would be on TV the same way that I Dream of Jeannie would be on TV in the middle of the day, and I would just see it, and it held no kind of specialness for me. But I definitely remember that when the movie came out in 1989, that I kind of already knew what it was. And because it was a big pop culture thing, because Prince did the soundtrack, that was huge. Like, I had it on tape, I had it on VHS, I had it on everything. And even still, I didn't consider myself a big Batman fan. It was just one of those things that, like, as this nerdy kid, you had that because it was a nerd thing, and there was only so much nerd stuff that was like full force available everywhere. And that predated me reading any comic books or anything. And when I got into comic books, it didn't strike me like, oh, now I should read a Batman comic. Like, me reading X-Men felt totally disconnected to that. So I probably was aware of Batman like way before I was aware of like what comic books were, or reading any comic books or any other comic book characters.
That's cool.
So did you know that the Batman and Superman share the same universe? Because I didn't know for a very long time.
I probably did, because so there were these Super Friends was a cartoon, but there was a huge line of toys in the 80s by Kenner of Super Friends. And they were really cool because they were not like modern toys or even toys from the 70s where everything was the same sculpt and they were just like dressed differently or a different head. Each one of them were like radically different in sculpt. So it was really cool. Like the Darkseid was huge, and like there was a Wonder Woman, and there was and there were obscure stuff like Firestorm and Red Tornado and things like that. And so I think I just understood them to kind of all be together because they marketed the toys so well.
That's cool. Yeah, it's one of those weird things where there's like those properties kind of like branch into other places, because Teen Titans and all that got me to the first comic I think I ever read was Identity Crisis at the library.
I'm so sorry.
I know. Well, I was too young to know what was happening, but I recognized, Slade Wilson, Deathstroke, and I just kind of like pieced it all together from there. But then like you come back to it now and you're like, oh, this is hot garbage. But yeah.
Before we get to any topics that are specific to Grant Morrison's run, including Black Casebook and some chat about Marson and Morrison's material itself, I want to talk about the beginning of Batman. Batman begins in the comics. So for this episode, we have all read the Batman story from Detective Comics 27, and we all also read all of Batman #1, which has 4 pretty big stories in it, including the debut appearances of Joker and the Cat, later known to us as Catwoman. So Detective Comics 27, pretty short, and this should be a pretty quick one to go around. Harry, what did you think of it? Have you read it before? And what was your reaction to this first ever Batman story?
I've read it in the past, but it's been kind of more just like flipping through and what have you, because it is such like a template, or just very like just the most basic elements of the story that we all know very well now, because it was written, almost not almost 100 years ago, but a lot of decades ago. And the biggest thing that always strikes me is, because it's such a big deal now, is that in this book, Batman is totally fine letting someone die. He's like kind of like having he's having a good time. There's a moment where like the one character just falls in the acid and he's just like, good, it works out great. The other thing was, and this is such it's just a random thing, is that when one character, because the three businessmen are like, this is a big plot with the three businessmen and what have you. And, one of them gets trapped, and it's like using a machine to experiment by killing guinea pigs. And I thought that was very specific and crazy. And I was just like, wow, you're just spending all your time killing guinea pigs, unless he meant like a broader term for that. But I choose to think it was the actual guinea pigs. But no, it was just fun. I love seeing that old costume. I love seeing just like it's not something that I love the story, but I appreciate seeing all of these elements that are going to be kind of built on and tweaked on and remixed and what have you for just years and years and years to come. So it was, I liked it.
Fariha, what did you think about Detective Comics 27?
It was something that Harry mentioned, that he just pushed someone in the vat. It's like, ha 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 ha. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
But I was thinking about, actually, while I was thinking about it, I was also thinking about oh my God, I'm forgetting it. The Two Worlds, we talked about it before.
Earth 2?
No, not Earth 2. It's like, anyway.
Oh, Wrong Earth from McCoy.
Wrong Earth! Yeah, by Wrong Earth. So I was thinking about that comics as well, because in that is like a juxtaposition of two Batman, in a way, in like told in a different ages, and they swap their world, and how it just was so weird. So I was kind of thinking about that, because the very first thing is like Commissioner Gordon. He's not even a commissioner at that time. Commissioner Gordon just sitting there in a having smoke with a billionaire or a millionaire at that time, and then just having a good time. And then he picks up the phone, and then he goes on to it. And I was like, what a simple life was at that time. That police,
just hanging out,
police commissioner just hanging out with the socialites,
just you're saying.
I was just saying that kind of made me laugh. And then also it's just I think this is like Batman as a detective, and Batman as a it was a different kind of hero, I would think. I don't know, maybe from that point of view, that it's like, it's not a punch him thing. It's like he's trying to solve a mystery. And I think from that point, I kind of appreciated that. And it was also like very much of a I've seen this before, and there was something a lot familiar about it. But this is all where it started.
Yeah, for me, it was really similar. The two things that stuck out are the things I think you just pointed out. One is just the utter comedy of this layabout millionaire that is Bruce Wayne. He just hangs out at the police station. Why? Just because he does. And I think that it's hard to define Bruce Wayne, because we have that natural difficulty with suspending our disbelief of how do they not know he's Batman, or where do they think he is all the time, or how do they not get that he's so strong and physically, he has so much physical prowess. But there's none of that baggage here, and so it's kind of just fun to laugh at how baldly he's really just using his friendship with Commissioner Gordon to fuel the Batman stuff. But the other thing that really stuck out to me, as Fariha said, is it's a detective book. And the whole point, I think, that really gets driven home for me, that's gotten ruined, I think, over the years, is Batman's practical. He doesn't need some multi-layer scheme to do something. He's like, there's gas, let's plug the hole, And I think that over time, both in the Golden and Silver Age Detective Comics and in the modern day, this has been turned into this infallible Batman. This Batman who's planned everything ahead. He's got a box for every Justice League member. That doesn't really appeal to me at all. What appeals to me is Batman in the moment being like, oh, I can plug this hole so no more gas comes out. I can break this bell jar. It's not that he's thought of everything. It's that he can think of something. And that, to me, in this moment, I was like, oh, I see how it started. And actually, I might like this better. than what it's turned into over the years, which is Batman being this person who's thought of every eventuality.
Well, the thing is, and we're going to get to it later, but the Grant Morrison series really posits Bruce Wayne Batman as that ultimate planner, but rather than it feeling like a lazy shorthand for getting out of plots or kind of just like easy resolution, it's like, what does the ultimate planner look like when operating on this much larger Grant Morrison scale and becomes a much bigger conflict? Because I know what you mean. Sometimes there's just like, oh, Batman figured it out, I guess we'll go home. It's a little dissatisfying, but like that idea is, it's Grant Morrison taking a human, but like, what does the ultimate human look like, kind of thing. So we'll see.
We also read Batman #1, which I mean, I don't want to steal any thunder, but I was shocked multiple times over in multiple ways. So this is a whole Batman issue, and it's long. These Golden Age issues are long, and it has 4 stories in it. The first Joker story, a Hugo Strange story, the first Catwoman story, and then a redux / kind of epilogue to the Joker story. So Harry, what did you think about Batman 1? What was like the most shocking or the most fun for you?
So what I really liked is just the first page is just the legend of Batman and who he came to be, and you kind of get into his origin, and it's already, even like page 2, it's already getting into, first of all, Batman, his parents die, and he makes he swears by the spirit of his parents to avenge their deaths by spending the rest of his life warring on criminals. But then it says not only does he like work to become the peak human male, like the literal like bodybuilder figure in like those like old like ads for like beach bodies and what have you, but he also like becomes like the ultimate scientist, which I don't think you see a lot in the Batman books, but it kind of leads into the Grant Morrison thing later of just this character who is interested in various kind of chemicals and toxins and working up immunities to them and figuring out how to get around them. It's like there's this interesting shading that's even kind of there. Beyond that, I just love the phrasing of like him and Robin hanging out, and like they know the Joker's around, and Robin's just like, so are we gonna like go get this guy? Thinks that we're gonna go take a shot at him, like let's just go mess up Batman, which is just kind of fun, and it's like cool to see the beginning of the Joker. And then finally, you have the Catwoman story, and it's fun seeing. I know I'm getting ahead here, but here's the thing, and we're gonna get into in the book. Batman is way more fun when he's horny. It's like a way funnier aspect of this super stoic character, and he was plenty horny even from the get-go here. So I enjoy seeing this coy repressed man kind of like show some stuff there.
His first reaction to his later to be his bride is to wash the old woman thing off her face and then say, quiet or Papa spanks. This is how love starts. True love begins this way. I
mean, he's a horny fool, and that's going to be part of the character for me. So.
Fariha, I think I've maybe read that Catwoman story before in one of these anniversary books, but as I was reading it, I was just thinking, I'm so excited to hear what Fariha thinks about it.
I was shocked though, because I think I've seen that panel before and I genuinely thought it was someone made that up.
Me too. I was sure that it couldn't possibly say Papa Spank on the
Papa Spank.
No, it says quiet or Papa Spank. And then there is a S&M character, like characteristics to these two characters because the way they dress up. And then she actually has a whip with her. So all the time. So it's just like, this is where it all started, you guys. And then there's a later book in the case book where he also threatens to spank someone. So it's like, so this is where he is, at any given point. I absolutely love that story though, because it's like, okay, that's a very Catwoman story. And then the fact that the very first one is such a quintessential Catwoman story, I'm like, what'd you know? And then, then he's like, he just lets her get away and then stops Robin from trying to get to her. It's like, don't worry. And I'm like, but I just wanted to say though, it's like how like the story that we have seen again and again, and it's kind of part of our culture, the Batman origin of his parents dying and he's becoming it, is told in 2 pages. Is told in 2 pages.
Yeah.
Like that's
very, very succinct.
Yeah, that to me just kind of blew my mind. And then also the Joker stories are actually kind of like Dark Knight Rises. Not Dark Knight Rises, but the Dark Knight, the movie. Because where it's like he's constantly giving deadlines and then it's like, I'm gonna get to like officials. Like that's the whole point of it. And it's scary. It's actually scary for something that came out in 40s. I was scared. I was like, whoa, so I was very excited about that because this is actually a very good Golden Age comics that I was not expecting it to be at all.
Yeah, I think
there's nothing goofy about it.
My biggest takeaway is like, read this comic. Like it's really, really good. We all have our hesitance with getting into the Golden Age, and having just read a lot of Golden Age for this episode, I understand why. But I also have Golden Age stuff that I love. Like I love Golden Age Wonder Woman. And I think that this comic, every story just works in its own way. That first Joker story, it is a masterpiece. It is tense. It's scary. Also, I really love that the Joker is, he's referred to as melancholy. He's very dour. He's not as entertained by his own works. He's just driven to be an agent of chaos. And again, this is something that has evolved over the years and has been pushed in a lot of different directions, but he's very dour and he's really, really scary. It feels like he's this inevitable force that's going to always get to you. And even Batman hasn't been able to like surmise all of the ways that Joker can set up a joke.
It's like it kind of dips into this almost like the horror aspect.
Yeah.
This is a ghoul. This is like a grinning monster. And like it's funny because this is one of the Jokers I'm pretty dang sure was used in Jeff Johns' Three Jokers Black Label book that recently came out. And I'll be honest, he's still scarier in this one. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's just cool seeing this design where he is just like, it's not like the goofy comedy thing, but it's not like this like edgelord thing. It's just like this haunted, almost like spooky figure of the night, you know?
Yeah, and he really connects to a lot of archetypal comic book villains. I mean, you see here, I think, better than you do in the modern age, almost how he connects to somebody like Loki, right? He's not driven just by the comedy of it. He's a god of chaos. He wants to create constant unrest, constant uncertainty, and it doesn't really matter in the end to him if he goes to prison or not. Which is a lot like Dark Knight. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't realize how well they did him in the movie based on this being his first appearance.
Yeah, and I think like all of it came from this, because in Dark Knight, there's also like the mobs are like, oh, he's trying to get into our business. Then there's like him trying to pick up random officials and then saying that I'm going to kill them at this time. And then they get killed. Like it's just like the same thing. And, it just like he's also after some jewels, which we know now he doesn't care about those things.
He doesn't care. He'll set them aside.
So it was just a MacGuffin for him. And then, so yeah, I mean, the fact that this is like the first appearance of Joker and the first appearance of, I just want to say though, I mean, I was blown away by the first page where it's the legend of Batman and how they drew Batman. So yeah, that's Bill Finger, right? Who did it? Because I know there was like a lot of things, because even though it said that by Bob Kane everywhere, there is no mention of Bill Finger in a lot of these things.
That's how it went.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, like, it just so well done. I mean, I was like, it's all black. There's not like, a little bit of shading. But the thing is, like, it's like this icon that just appered back in the pages and it's still persevering after like 80 something years. It's just, I was blown away by that. It's such a simple image, but spoke so much.
And the going back again to that, just the one panel of like him like sitting in his room praying by candlelight, swearing to fight criminals. There's something so like pulpy and gothic, and just it's much more like moody than the typical like heroic thing that you see with this character. And then immediately it's followed by like more pulpy like cartoon stuff, which is totally cool. But like it is like there are themes that kind of get lost sometimes, or like an eeriness that we kind of get away when they becomes a bigger, more heroic character as it gets more popular, with variations and exceptions, of course.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we haven't mentioned, because it's not Joker or Catwoman, is that second story, which is a Hugo Strange story. Hugo Strange, who I looked it up, he actually had debuted prior to Batman in Detective Comics, but then they refitted him as a Batman villain. And because it's kind of this like horrific bad science story, which I think partially the comic code and things like that cut off from being as much the focus of Batman as perhaps it once was. But this is also very much in the DNA of modern Batman, not only in the Joker turning people into Jokers, but just like there's constant monsters in Gotham, and I think that this has the DNA of that as well. And it has Batman killing people in the story too, which people on Twitter, as I was reading it, pointed out to me like, yeah, early in the Golden Age, he didn't have that code. Like that came later. So I don't think that was the best story in the book by any stretch of the imagination. But again, I think there are interesting bits of DNA. And you have to think we're coming to this, we are not big Golden Age, Silver Age readers. So like Fariha's like, oh, and I are both like, oh, the DNA of Batman 1 is in Dark Knight movie. I'm sure there's 100 other Joker stories really similar to that that we're not going to get a chance to read. But that's why we wanted to go back and read the early stuff so we could kind of root ourselves on like, where did Batman start? Because Grant Morrison absolutely comes to Batman from that perspective. So now I think we can start to transition into talking about Grant Morrison a little bit. And to do that, I want to introduce that Grant Morrison is identified currently as non-binary, and they use they, them pronouns. And this is pretty new news to the world at large as of 2021. It originated from an interview in October 2020 with Mondo2000.com. And in response to a comment about the magic and power of words, Marson said this, and I'm going to read a pretty long Marson quote here, although I will skip a couple of words in it, and I'll make that clear. He says, I've been non-binary, cross-dressing, genderqueer since I was 10 years old, but the available terms for what I was doing and how I felt were few and far between. We had, and he uses two outdated words for non-binary and trans people, both of which sounded like DSM classifications rather than lifestyle choices. I didn't want to be labeled as a medical aberration because that's not how it felt, nor was it something cut and dried and done. I didn't want to transition or embody my female side exclusively, so I had no idea where I fit in. Terms like genderqueer and non-binary only came into vogue in the mid-90s. So kids like me had very limited ways of describing our attraction to drag and sexual ambiguity. Nowadays, there's this whole new vocabulary allowing kids to figure out exactly where they sit on the color wheel of gender and sexuality. So I think it's okay to lose a few contentious words when you're creating new ones that offer a more finely grained approach to experience. And after that article, CBR.com followed up with an article about that article, as they do. But they did reach out to Marson, and Marson confirmed that he wanted to use they, them pronouns, even though the original article used he, him pronouns. You might hear us make a few errors in referring to Marson's pronouns over the course of the season. In each case, we're just going to quickly correct ourselves and move forward. When you misgender someone, the focus shouldn't be on you and how hard it is for you to remember or get their pronouns right. The best way to resolve your errors and ours is to just correct yourself, to form a good habit of using correct pronouns, and to just move on with respect. And if you've, of course, hurt or offended anybody, you should take that apology to them specifically. But in the scope of the show, we're just going to correct ourselves and we're going to be better all of the time. So I want to talk about our experience with Marson. We've all read some of their comic books before. We've loved some. We've hated others. What Morrison knowledge are we bringing to our read of their Batman? Starting with Harry.
All right, so yeah, I am a massive fan of Grant Morrison. I read their books. So my first issues of single issue comics from a comic shop were Secret Invasion and Final Crisis. I did not understand one of them very well at all. It was Final Crisis because Grant Morrison it was madness. He takes a lot of stuff from the Golden Age, the Silver Age, all kinds of obscure characters, brings them together, throws them in a pot, shakes them up, and good luck figuring it out. That's kind of why I like Final Crisis. We will get to that later. And but basically, but the reason why I like this writer so much is I've read a lot of his work. Weirdly, the one I haven't is Animal Man. Their work is Animal Man is because they're a writer that completely just embraces the goofiness and the surreality of comic books and the optimism of that kind of style. And that was so fun to me getting into this because, like I said, Dark Knight was one of the first movies or comic movies I really watched and embraced, but that is a very specific, serious, stark, kind of brutal portrayal. And, Grant Morrison's books, they're also, there's a few like that, but they're also embracing just the insanity and the joy of these superhero worlds. So that's what always appealed to me. It was just like the fun of them all and the lack of embarrassment about being silly and what have you. And when you were talking about the Black Case book, there's so much silly stuff in these books that he just takes wholesale to his run. But it's great. And I actually read, so I've read, so anyways, long story short, Batman and Final Crisis were the first books of his I read. Then I bounced to All-Star Superman. I actually, We 3, I did read New X-Men, which is fine. I went hard and I went to read their book The Invisibles, which is their like Vertigo magnum opus, which is utter just bonkers insanity. I still don't understand it. I think I went to another dimension while reading it. But then I also read they actually wrote a novel, Super Gods, which is a really, really great book about the history of comics. Which I really enjoyed. And just, I kind of like around the New 52 Batman Inc. is when I kind of fell off their work a little bit, because New 52 caused me to fall off a lot of DC books eventually. But like, I always have like a soft spot in my heart for like this book, this run in particular is when I was discovering like what comics could be beyond trying to ape movies or the Mark Millar style. There was so much more potential and creativity and optimism. And that is still like so thrilling to me when I think about it now. So I am a big fan. Even I don't love their new stuff that much, but I always have the hope that I'll get that feeling again.
What about you, Fariha? What is your experience with Morrison's work?
So I have read Animal Man, New X-Men. New X-Men was one of the earliest Marvel comics I read, and I was horrified by this ugly mutant. Anyway, but then I
save it for season 3. Keep it under wraps.
I'll save it. Then I read Animal Man, Doom Patrol, We 3, Flex Mantello, and then I think I read like a couple other books that I can't remember. I just love the fact that when they write, they're self-aware about their weirdness. Like, it's not like something that a lot of people don't necessarily are self-aware about their weirdness. But but they are. And the thing is, like, I absolutely loved the last issue of Animal Man that they did, where it's about them meeting their creation, and then they were saying that to Buddy that I created you this way because that's what I wanted to. I wanted to give a part of myself to you, and because of that, you're a vegetarian. The next writer will pick you up, and then you will be a carnivore. And sure enough, he became a carnivore. And then the same way, he picks up Robin, Damien, and Damien decides that he's gonna be vegetarian. So it's just this idea that he introduces, and there's like a bit like they introduces, and there is like a self-awareness about it that I adore. And that's why I don't feel like they're trying to do a gotcha, or they're trying to be saying that, oh, I'm smarter than you. It's just like, this is what they think good, comics should be. This is what the story that they want to tell, and they're just telling it. That's one of the reasons, I wasn't I always wanted to read this Grant Morrison series, like a Batman series, because I'm like, this is considered to be one of their best work, and I want to get to that someday. Invisibles, nah. I don't think I get
that one's a lot. It's just straight up a lot. I don't even have a thing about it. Actually, in the first omnibuses I have, it's over here. I lost the dust jacket. Anyway,
yeah,
it's gigantic. It's a big.
Yeah.
For me, so I've already detailed how when I first came back to comics, literally the first thing I read was New X-Men, probably a mistake. And the reason I realize it's a mistake now is because Marson is the kind of creator who wants to make a lot of reference. And I really came to understand it after reading Super Gods, which is a fascinating, it's part research, part autobiographical, really, really fascinating, even if you're not a big Morrison fan. And I came back to some other Morrison comics, especially because then I started liking this Batman. I was like, oh, maybe I was wrong about them. And then I really was hating everything else. I really, really hate Grant Morrison comic books. And so I tried a lot of them, and I often gave up after a couple issues. I read Animal Man. I hated it. I also
How far you gotten into?
Animal Man, I read the whole thing, every single issue, despised it. And so
Oh,
then I read
okay.
his Green Lantern that he just did. I think it was awful.
Oh,
I think it's
well.
and I not only read it, but I like went through panel by panel and took notes and dissected it. And I really think it was truly terrible. But here's what I took away from that makes me excited to come back to this read. I think Morrison, if they had been making things for TV this whole time, we would be receiving them differently. Morrison likes to play with what assumptions you bring and the interpretations you bring. But when we see something on television, something in motion, there's no gutter in between the panels, right? Like there's no space. Yeah. And so we never have to interpret in the space. We watch something continuously and then it's over. And then the gutter space is the installment between that and the next episode. And in writing, in prose, again, there's not space. I mean, you could say there's space between paragraphs, but there's not the kind of space there is in comics where you have to add your interpretation in. And I have come to understand now about Marson that he's really looking for you as the reader to like make an active decision in every one of those spaces in between the panels. And I don't always like to read comics like that. I like to read a comic that gives me something complete. And then afterwards, I like to go back and dissect it. I don't like to give as much as myself to a comic as I'm reading it. And so as I dissected Green Lantern, even though I didn't like Green Lantern, I think I came to appreciate Morrison a lot more because I finally came to this realization of like, the reason I don't like their writing is I'm not willing to give them as much as me as they're asking from everyone else. And so now I'm really excited to, in good faith and fully without reservation, totally give myself to their writing in Batman and really explore the space in between and see if maybe it works better for me than all the Marson stuff I've read that I've hated.
That's a good read. I mean, it's definitely a way of putting, like
now,
if he's got a thing, and if you like it, you really like it.
But now I'm scared how much of me they took.
We're gonna lose her. We're gonna lose her.
How much did you leave behind in Animal Man?
Yes, I still have the omnibus. Now I can never sell it because part of me is in it.
But that's the magic. He is an actual life magician, in that I mean, they really practice the actual practice of magic, and I really have come, especially after reading Super Gods, have come to read all of their work as a magic trick that captures a little part of your soul. Like that's why it's so unsettling.
Nameless is like a black magic version of that. Nameless is one of those. That's an amazing book. That's disorienting, and you feel weird reading it.
Hey, writers, stop taking parts of me. Like, not allowed. Stop it. Like, and they didn't even say that I'm taking parts of you. How dare you? Like,
they're also like they're just like a super influential writer in that a lot of the stuff they've introduced has gotten picked up hard. I mean, obviously the big ones is basically everything Jonathan Hickman has ever done. You can probably attribute to Morrison in one way or the other, which is good, and then, between Quentin Quire and the Smashers and
Phantom
Hickman's
X.
Avengers. Phantom X, like he's really had a lot of influence, like as the years have gone on. Even though if his books at the time seemed esoteric or a little, non-functional, or however you want to define that.
Right? What is functional in a comic book? That's
I know.
What are they? One thing I do want to say though is that All-Star Superman is kind of interesting read as well by them. Like if you were planning,
I hate that one too.
Because it took a lot out of you. I know.
Yes.
And then you were left with empty Peter vessel.
There's nothing in him.
No, I'm talking about some of the ideas about what it is to be Superman is introduced in it. That is like a lot of other writers have not necessarily talked about, or it was out there, but they consolidated it. Especially like the fact that why no one recognizes him with glasses. They gave like a very distinct reason, and you were like, oh, I buy that. So I do recommend people to pick that up as well.